So first I'm going to make it in a faster way so that we have an overview, and then we will learn about the detailed method from this timestamp. First I created a folder. I'm going to create a new level or map. This is going to be my tutorial level. I'm going to double click on this, save. Simply going to add all the stuff. Just remember, this is an overview first and then we will do the detailed one. I'm going to add the landscape, create this. If I play now, I can now use the character, but we don't want that. So I'll create new blueprint class, a new game mode. So pp underscore tutorial game mode base or something. Let's go to world settings and override it with the new one that we created. So tutorial GM base. If I play now, we should not have the character. I'm going to create new blueprint character pp underscore tutorial character. I'm going to select that one. So tutorial, I have 2, so I'll just call it 2 because I actually practiced it first. This is going to be 2. So if I now click, nothing's going to happen. I am not able to move. I'm going to create a player controller pp underscore player controller tutorial player controller. Again, I have showed in the detailed video on how to do in like both methods or 2 different methods, but in this one I'm showing this one. I double click this. Let's keep it around here. Before doing all that stuff, I'm going to create an inputs folder. In here I'm going to create an input mapping context imc underscore t controls or something. I'll just name you should name it better. I'm just naming it because I've already created like lots of stuff. So just to remember it, I'll call it inputs. I'll call this as input. The imc t controls is the database. Here we need to create each and every stuff. So input action I underscore t underscore walk. Input action I underscore t underscore look. Again, I'm just naming it this way because I've already created like multiple input actions first, so this would make it easy for me to just see. I'll create jump IAT jump, look and walk. If I click on walk, I want this one to be 2D vector. Let's close this. I want the jump to be digital bull, and I want this look to be 2D vector. Make sure everything is saved, and then in my pp tutorial character, I'm going to select my mesh, and here I'll select a character. So I can use SK mannequin character. I can move this down, move this 90 degree, make it small. So now if I click play, this is how it's going to look. I now need to add a camera like this. I need to add a spring arm like this. Make sure camera is child of spring arm. Let's give this, let's say 50, maybe 200. Now you could see this is how it's looking automatically because we're using character. It already knows that we have to use spring arm and camera. I have my database, so input mapping context and then all my inputs. So let's select for each one of them. So first one would be I underscore t walk. So I underscore t walk. I'll do d because d, then I'll do a. So x is going to be this one. This one I want it to be negative x, so I'll add a modifier and then do negate. So this one would be negative x. I'll do plus, this one would be w, and this one would be s. This one I need to go into modifiers, go into swizzle, and then make sure it is on y-axis. Here I need to do the same thing. I need to swizzle this and then add another one which is negate like this. So now this one is plus x, this is minus x, this is plus y, and this is minus y. I'm going to do similar for my look. So IAT underscore look, but instead of here I'm just simply just going to select the mouse xy 2D, then add one more. This one would be I underscore t jump. This one simply just needs to have space like this. So I've created the BP tutorial player controller. I can just go in here and select that one. So BP, go into this one. Make sure to select open full blueprint editor. First thing I'll do is search for local subsystem. Select this one instead of this one. Do add mapping context. Select the context which we created in here, which is T controls. Add it in here. Let's do play. You can search for enhanced local player system. We will use this one because we are in controller, but if we were doing this in our character, we would use this one. If you check the detailed video, which is after this one, you will understand why and how we can do that. Then in here, I can simply just add the logic for IAT underscore walk like this. I'll do split the struct bin. I'll do add movement input like this. I'm going to do is get control rotation. I'm going to split this. I'm going to do get right vector, split this and connect this to. This would give us basically what our camera is looking or what the right of our camera is. And then we connect this and this. If you watch the video after this, you will understand what I mean by this. Let's do X. Let's copy this. Let's do in here. Let's first only check this much if it is working. So if I do play, D is moving left, right. Okay, we got that. Let's connect this one. Let's get our rotation and let's get forward vector. Let's do split and then let's only connect the Z. Let's go in here and connect the Y. If I go now, WSD is working. For our movement of our camera, I will do I underscore T underscore look. I'm going to split this. I'll do add control rotation. I'll choose add control pitch roll. So one of this works. I don't remember which one. So I'll just add all of it for now. So I'm going to select triggered and then add X around here to see what happens. Nothing's happening simply because we now need to go into spring arm and say use pawn control rotation. So this is moving in the wrong direction. So let me try connecting X in here. This is still wrong. Let me try this one. Okay, so this is right. So for left and right, yaw is what you need to use. And then if I connect this like this and then do Y, it is working, but my up and down is inverted. So I'll go into my mapping context. I will look into my look, click in here and then add a modifier, which would be negate. But I only want to do for the Y axis. So I don't want to do for X and Z. Now if I look up, down, it works, but my character is also looking the same direction. Because right now our camera uses this stuff, but if I go in here, if I search for controller, our pawn, which is this one, is also using this one. So if I click here, it's not going to use whatever rotation is added by this one. So if I go here and do this, I can now move my camera, but the issue is it's not looking perfect. It's not moving or it's not facing the direction. So we will go into our character movement. We'll search for orient. Orient rotation to movement basically makes it look to the direction it is moving. So if I do A, it's moving A, D, S. If I move my camera, it's basically going to try to move to that location, which is perfect. Let's add the jump. Let's do I underscore T jump. Let's go in here and search for jump. Let's search for stop jumping. We can do branch. Again, this step is like optional, I think, but it's good to do it still, I guess. So if it is pressing, we will do jump. If it is false, we will not do jump. You could see now I can jump. If I press space, we can do this and it moves completely. Now we will learn the detailed method and what and how it works. This is just an overview so that when you come back, you could just watch this so that you could make it quickly. So currently I'm in third person map and this is what's provided by Unreal Engine, right? But when I started, I wanted to know how this works so that I can at least know how I can do some changes and all. So I'm going to make something from scratch and I'm not going to add the animations. So the way these animations are added, that requires like more, and I'll create the video later. So in my content folder, I'm just going to create a new level, something like this. If you want, you can even color it. I like to do is, or rather than that, let's create like tutorial or something. Okay. Instead of this, I like to create 00 level, and I'm going to give this a color of orange simply because the level also has a color of orange, so it just matches. I'll call it as tutorial or TUT just for quick stuff. I'm going to create an with visit environment light mixers and create all the lighting. There it is. And then let's add a landscape. So we got all this stuff, and obviously if I click now, the third person template is added automatically, or the third person character, because by default it is going to use whatever it is set as in project settings, I think. But what I want is I want to use like a different game mode for this one. So obviously you could create new game mode and set that as the default game mode for you. But for now, I'm just going to override it for at least this map. So let's create a blueprint and let's use game mode base. I like to do bp underscore tut game mode base, something like this. And probably just organize it better, but it's good. I'm just going to do it like this. And now we can override the default settings with the new settings that is provided by this one. So let's go in here and select our tut game mode base. If I click now, you could see I'm actually able to move like this. My character is not spawning, and that's simply because right now we are using this default pawn class, which comes by default in the element in this Unreal Engine. But you could say we are not actually using the one that was created by the third person character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the character now. Now you could see we have pawn and actor, and you could see a pawn is an actor that can be possessed and receive input from a controller. This you could think of it as a car or horse or any other drivable stuff which your actor can possess, basically take control of. And character is a type of pawn, which is it is a type of pawn, but it has the ability to walk around. Now the reason why we are using character is because Unreal comes with its own functionality that they have made for just the character controller or character blueprint class. So it just makes it easy. So I'm just going to call it as TUT character. You could name it anything. And now if I go into this default pawn, we can get the PPTUT character like this. It is in the world settings. If you do not see this, then you will need to like make sure this is enabled. Now if I click, you could see I'm not able to move at all, because this character has like no controller and nothing given to it basically. So how about we start making that stuff? Now I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it as inputs. And inside of this, I'm going to create two stuff. So one of it is input mapping context. Input mapping context, you could think of it as a database of controls or inputs that is given to your like current scene. So for example, if you're playing GTA 5 and you're just walking around everywhere, then controls are a bit different, right? When you press space, it does jump. If you like do a WSD, it just moves around. And then if you press left click, it basically does punch or gun. And then let's say you go into a car, you start driving a car, suddenly the controls changes, right? So WSD basically drives the car now. Space does whatever space is allowed and left does whatever left allows. So suddenly the context has changed, and that is how we can simply just create database for, let's say, a character moving or a car moving and all that stuff. So in this one, I'm going to call it input. I'm going to just type it imc underscore. We can call it movement or locomotion or whatever you want to. Now this is just going to be a database of stuff, okay? So this IMC movement is just going to be like a context for whenever we are moving. For these mappings, we actually need to go into here and I'll call it as input. You could name it like better, because inputs and then inputs again, it's redundant, but it's your choice. Then we go into input and type, select input actions, and these are individual actions basically. So I can say IA jump like this. So this is just going to be for jump. So input action jump. And then if I click on it, double click, it basically gives me options in here, lots of them. One of it is going to be this value type. So there are multiple value types. Digital bull basically can have like two values. One of it is like true and false. So you could think of it as when the button is pressed, it's true, and when the button is not pressed, it's false. So that's only two values. It's good when you just have to apply like one option to this. So next is axis 1D float. It basically, you could think of it as like one single axis, which is going to be X like this. 2D is going to be basically two y-axis too, like this. And then obviously we have Z 3D vector, which is basically, any element inside of this would have like three axes. So if I click something like this, you could see there are three axes, right? And this basically allows us to have like two values. So let's say we can have value of 1 when it is clicked, and if we do negative, then it would be like minus negative, and there's 0 when nothing's clicked basically. And then y is going to be 1, and then like negative 1 like this. On this one are basically our, if we want to do it, we have to add like a modifier for this, which I'll show how to do that. And that's basically what this 1D and 2D axis are. But the thing is, what you apply to this 1D, 2D, 3D axis is completely dependent on you guys. Now, whether you want to make or use this axis to move around or to add any other controls, it's up to your choice. You could even use your D-pad, your D-pad, which is available on the gamepad like this. It is also possible to use this axis and then apply like different controls for each button with this axis. Okay, and not just this axis, like literally anything. You could apply like any different setup or any movement that you want, or any type of input or logic you want to this one. So it's not going to suddenly make it go right and left. It just gives you option of having different values, and then what you do to this is dependent on you. So I'm going to select I jump and set it to digital bull because that's what I want. And then I'm going to create new one, input action. I'm going to call it I underscore movement, I guess, or let's do walk or something like walk. And then there's going to be another one, which is going to be free look. I'm going to call it free look because I actually did some practice before recording this. So I'm just going to name it something like weird, like walk free look, so that it's easy to see. And then IA walk, I double click IA walk, and this one I want it to be 2D because I want to have like front, back, right and left values. And then I free look, which is this one also should be 2D because my mouse can move left, right, top, bottom like this too, right? It's not 3D, it's not going front and back. We have just created like inputs, but we have not given it what they do. We have just said that this input is like digital bull, this input is just an axis. So IMC movement in here is where we give it some stuff basically. So in here mappings, if I click plus, I can now select all the stuff that I've done. So there are lots of them, but okay, I'm actually going to call it as IATUT jump, something like this, because there's already like previous created ones. Okay, so first of all, I want to do I underscore free, or not free look, walk. Okay, this one I walk. Okay, if you see rest of this, these are like when I did some practice and also from the starter template. Now before I proceed, I actually should have done this first, but let me show still. If I go to my BPTUT character, this one, you could see we don't really have much inside of this except a capsule collision box and arrow which shows the direction of the front, which is going to be our x-axis. Always remember front in Unreal is x-axis. And the reason why I say using character movement or character, because it comes up with lots of different settings that are added by Unreal, which makes it easier to create our own component like this or character. And again, this character can actually be used for like other stuff to like NPCs and all. It doesn't really have to be just for your movement stuff. Okay, and you could see it comes with walking, jumping, falling, distance and all that stuff. So this code has already been done for us. via Unreal. Now, if you select mesh, you can actually select what you want to use in here. So I'm just going to search for, I guess, SK mannequin and place it around here like this, 90, and make it a bit smaller so that we can actually see. I'm going to make it slightly more smaller so that it is understandable when we are working with it. So we got a character which looks at the front of this capsule, which is this BP tutorial character. Now all the stuff that we do in here is going to be an event graph. And now we need to tell the game that this is the context right now. So we want to move right now. Our character is currently moving. So use that context, which is this database of character movements. Okay. So if I click on my event begin play right now, I can search for enable input like this. And one of the best thing that you could do is, rather than doing it in here, it's better to create a player controller. So going into like blueprint and making a player controller, and then added it around there, and then basically going into world settings and selecting that player controller around here. And that way we don't need to do it in here. I think so that it's better to do it in here. Okay, in the player controller class, it basically makes it easier for, I think, multiplayer and all. But for this tutorial purposes, I'm using this thing. But I think you have to basically just create a blueprint class. I've not practiced it, so let me just check. I think you have to just like do the same stuff that I do, like enable input like this, and then do all the stuff. Okay, how about we try that? Okay, let's first try it around here and then maybe even do this, because I haven't practiced it, which is why I'm a bit confused whether I should do that or not. But if I go into this BP tutorial character, I can say enable input, but which player controller it is. So I can just say get player controller. Now one thing you would see that if this was in multiplayer game, this would not work nicer, because it says that get player controller player index 0. Okay, so let's say, so when I, let's say, launch this game, then I would be the player 0, and my friend who joins would be the player 1, and then the next one would be player 2. But I've only enabled the control for player 0. In this video, I'm just going to do this because maybe in future, when I improve my skills, I'll improve it too. And also another thing, that if you were actually hosting this in a dedicated server, I think the player index 0 would be that dedicated server, which would be like, again, not a player but just a server, right? So it's not good to do this, but for single player this is good enough. The target itself, so it is basically saying that enable input on this character, so that whenever we add any inputs around here, it would work. Then we need to do is, we need to get the enhanced, I think we have to search around here. So enhance, yep, this one. So there are in local, it's supposed to be in this one, player controller, local player subsystem, and this one. So we get like both of these connections. I'm also going to connect the player controller in here. And then here we are going to say add mapping context. And let's do in the target like this. And here we will choose our IMC movement. Okay, why do I have double? Let me rename this something. So I'll call it as TUT movement, so that I know which one it is. So IMC TUT movement. Now the thing is, let's say if you have multiple stuff, let's say you have a car and all, you don't need to do this for every single one of them. Okay, this mapping context is actually now activated for the whole game. Okay, so it's not going to be like, okay, it's not going to be like if I have a remote control car in my game, I have to add this again or do that again. No, you have to only do it one. We are using the input local player system to add it. Okay, so you don't need to do it again and again, which is why it is like good to do it in this player controller. Let's try that later if it works, and then this is also a way to do it. Now what we have basically done is that we have said that use this context, so use this database right now. So you can understand what I mean, that if we want to just switch from a walking state to a car state, so basically my character goes to a car and gets in, we simply need to switch this mapping context to the different database that we create around here. So if I create like a different database by going into input mapping context, that's the one that is going to be used in future whenever we are switching. Okay, remember we created all these inputs: I free look, I tutorial jump, I walk. This is where we give what it can do. So if I search for I underscore walk, I now get the option of the walk stuff. Now remember what my walk was. So if I select here, you could see it was axis 2D, right? So if I now do this split, I get X and Y. If I turn this into 3D, save this, I get 3 axes around here. If I turn this into 1, I get only 1. And if I do digital bool, it turns into boolean value, which is basically yes and no. So I want this to be 2D, split this, and now I can assign different values to X and Y. Now before we do anything in here, which is allow or add any settings in here, we need to actually specify which button should do or do this I walk, right? So let me first do one thing. Let me add in here, or if you even like click like this, it can open more options. So triggered is basically it's going to continuously trigger this, or let's just do it. Why not? Let's first do print string. Obviously nothing's going to happen right now, and let's do X and then print this. And now you could see we do not have any button which is going to make this work, right? So if I press WSG, nothing's happening because we never set what this IMC tutorial I walk should do. So if I go in here and then basically add the I walk, I can now set a button. So let's say if I set D like this, I've only set D, okay? If I go in here, you could see as soon as I press D, everything's going 1. Now what if I add another button and add A? You could say it's still doing 1. It should be -1, right? Like I said, it should now be doing -1. It should not be doing 1, because if it's doing 1, then we do not have a way to connect some logic to the number 1. So for that, what we need to do is we need to go in here and in the modifiers, click here and say negate. Negate basically means that reverse it. And if I click in here, I can even specify which one I need to do. So right now by default, it is using x-axis. Right now we are only doing x-axis, okay? We are not doing y-axis. Even though this is 2D, where did it go? Even though we have set it to 2D, right now we are only able to control x-axis and nothing about the y-axis. So let's click here. Let's even if this is enabled, nothing's going to actually happen, I think, but it's good to do it, right, in case something happens. So when we do something like this default DA, we are doing x-axis, so we are only controlling the x-axis. If I click in here, if I do D, it says 1, and if I do A, it does -1. Why? Because we are basically reversing it. So how can we do some logic to our y-axis? Simple, we basically need to swap the order of the stuff. Now this thing confused me because what I initially thought, let me just do it first, okay? So let's do plus and let's do W like this. Now for the W, I can go into my modifiers. In here, I could choose visual input axis values. Now I'll show what I mean and what this does, but let's do this. If I click in this button, we get Y, X, Z. So you could see by default, this one uses XYZ, but this one is going YXZ. There's also like more options like Z, X, Z, Y and all that stuff. But currently D and A are only using X because that's what's going to be the default one. But when I press W, it's going to use the Y axis. So what I actually thought Swizzle meant in the past, and it is like the one thing that is easy to understand for me, but it's not what Swizzle does basically. So you know, this is how X and Y axis works, right? X is right and this is Y. When I thought that in the past that this is what Swizzle meant. It basically meant that we move it like this. So now it is like front and then left, right, right. Nope, this is not what it means. It was like completely different. Basically, we are now saying that take Y value in like consideration. Instead of doing X, take Y into consideration. And you could see that in the when I hover on it, it says swap X and Y axis, useful for binding 1D inputs to the Y axis for the 2D action. So right now this first two, we actually binded our keys. So this D was binded to the X value like this, and this A value is also binded to this X value, but we are basically saying that reverse whenever we click on that. So a D gives us 1, A gives us -1. And now when we do this, it's now going to do for Y axis. Okay, so now if I click W, so if I go in here, let me now connecting Y. Okay, so right now I'm connecting Y. If I do W, you could see it now shows 1. Okay, because now we are doing for Y axis. If I would have just not done the swap, okay, so let's say if I would have done no swap, none, okay, and if I would have pressed W, it is showing 0. So if it's showing 0, I do not have a way to add any value to this or add any controls to this, which is why right now we are saying that, hey, I did already for the x-axis, now let me do for the y-axis. And then whatever the number is at the first or letter is at the first, we can do y. If you want to even do like up and down by doing Q and E, you could use like 3D axis, and then here after doing all that stuff, you could even choose like, hey, now I want to do for the Z axis like this. So let's do Y X Z. We have set W as controlling the Y axis. Now next, one more thing, we want to do S. Now S we want to use, let's go in here, and we also need to use Y axis, right? We want to use Y axis for this one, Y X Z. But I want to do opposite of this one because we already are getting 1 when we are using Y, right? So if I do right now, I can say negate like this. So we are taking the Y value, but we are doing negative. So these are like 4 values that we can get when we are using axis 2D. If you use 3D, you could actually get 6 and then also apply up and down. So now that it is connected like this, let's see, if I press W, we get 1. If I do S, we get -1. A and D, we haven't connected what you call print string, right? So if I do print string like this, after this one, and then connect the X value. If I do D, now you could see we are getting like multiple values because we have like 2 print strings, right? So it's kind of getting confusing, but just keep in mind that this is when we are pressing D, the X is getting plus. When we are pressing A, the X is getting minus. When we are pressing W, it is getting 1. And when we are doing -1, it is getting -1 basically. When we are pressing S, it's getting -1. So you're going to be like, hey, Mayu, you did all that stuff. What's the point even of doing all that stuff? And again, this might look confusing, but all it simply does is that it allows you to have 4 different buttons in like single enhance input. So basically it allows us to have like 4 different buttons in this one. Probably there's like a lot more to it, considering like there's so many options in here, like hold and trigger, like this, all that stuff. But currently I only know this much, so just know that it at least allows you to have like 4 different values instead of having, let's say creating like 4 digital bulls, right? So you could obviously go and create like 4 digital bulls where it would give like 1 and 0 when you're pressing W or S, stuff like that. But using this one basically makes it easier for just to have one single input action for like 4 different values. Okay, so if I like press now, it's in first person. So let me go into my PP third person character. Where is it? So there's not even a camera. So let me add a camera. I'm going to go into add and search for camera, and we are going to add camera, not cine camera. Cine camera is mainly for, you can say it says for cinematic usage. It has like DSLR and all that option, but this is like good for a character basically. Now the thing is, if you add a camera to a character, it is automatically going to show from that camera view. You could see you do not need to do much settings, which is why we use like character, okay, which automatically checked that, okay, there's a camera, let me look through it automatically. And we look like this currently, but there's another thing called spring arm. Okay, so let's add this spring arm. Let me move it around here, and in this spring arm I'm going to connect my camera like this. So if I click and then in the camera I'm just going to reset everything so that it is at the end of a spring arm. So now if I move my spring arm, you could see it also moves the camera, but we don't need to use it via this option. We need to actually use it from the options that are provided around here. This basically decides how far it is. So let's say 200, and then I can even make it go like up. I don't know, when I slide, it like lags for some reason, which is why I just like to put numbers. So right now we have 60 and we are looking from up like this. So you could see, looks nicer, right? And the spring arm actually has like lots of option when we are using character movement, which is why we use spring arm. Now currently all this stuff you could actually just do in like less than 5 minutes, but because I'm explaining, it is taking time. For example, all we simply did was created a character, added some input actions, and then created some context with just some values that were changed. So it's not even that much that we have done, and it takes like less than 5 minutes. Now what I want to do is, when I press D, I want it to move right, and when I press A, I want to move left. So let's do one thing. Let's get a mesh, or you could even get your actor like this, or there are lots of stuff that you could do. I'm going to do for mesh. It's totally okay what you do. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to use something called movement input. Add movement input. This is only available for like when you're using something like movement something, so character movement or pawn movement, I think. So this movement component basically just uses whatever it is like given in here, which is like walking speed and all that stuff. But what does it need? So it basically needs which is your front location. So where is your character's front? So if I, let's say, if on trigger like this, if I add X like this, okay, so X is around here, scale value around here, it will give like +1 or -1. But now we need to give which direction it needs to do that. Should it do left or right or front and back? And how do we get that direction? Pretty easy. I actually selected my mesh, and this is not how you should do. It's good to do it this way if you're using a 2D game or something like that, which doesn't have your camera movement. And I'll explain what I mean by that, but I'm going to start this way, and then I'm going to change it to like a better way, because it's not like a better way, but for 2D games, this is what we do basically. Okay, so instead of using mesh, so for example, let's say if you use mesh and do get right vector, and then let's say you add it around here, my mesh right vector is, so if you look from this way like this, because this is front, right, the x-axis is in front. If you click on here, it's going to show this as front, but that's the global one. We actually need to check the local one. So each character has like different local x-axis, you could see. So just keep in mind that this character is made in this way, where it is not facing the right arrow, it is facing actually the green arrow. So if I use my right vector to use as a mesh around here, so get the mesh, and then I'm saying, hey, get the right vector, it's actually going to get this front side, okay, like this stuff. So if I try to move now by pressing A and D, it's moving front and back. I don't want that, so I cannot use this way. So what I can do is, I can actually get my full capsule component and then do get right vector, and you could see that if I get the right vector for this one and add it like this, if I do A, I move towards left. If I do D, I move towards right, like this. If you try to do something like get left vector, you're not going to get anything, okay? Simply because if you have right, you can simply just do like negative vector, and this would basically give you the left vector. So similarly, we have get forward vector, and then similarly we have get up vector like this. Obviously, if you want to do down, you reverse this, backward we reverse this. This basically gives which is the front and which is the right and stuff. And just keep in mind that red is always going to be the front. If you still want to use mesh, then you simply need to go in here, and instead of choosing what you call right, we need to get like forward, if you still want to do that like this. Now if I do A and D, it is moving, but it is moving opposite direction, because remember what I said, that the red is front like this and my character needs to move like this, right? So the forward vector is from that direction, and then I'll need to just do something like negative vector and then do world rotation, and now I should be able to move A towards left and D towards right. I'm going to use my capsule component and add it around here. Now what this, now if you're wondering what this gives, we can even do like print string. This one basically gives us value between 0 to 1 like this. So if I click in here, if I do D, you could see it's giving me like XYZ different values. So you could see that. Let's say if I was facing X direction in my world, completely straight, right? No, not a single deviation, then we will get like 100 like that, because we are not facing a little towards Y and we are not facing little towards Z. If I was facing like completely up, my Z would be 1 and rest would be 00, like so 001 because XYZ, right? So if I'm like looking at like weird direction, so I'm not even looking perfectly towards X, Y or Z, it's going to give us something like this random number. It's basically going to give us like this random number that is provided in here like this, which it knows. And you could see right now the numbers are obviously going to be the same. Why? Because we are not moving at all. We are always facing the same direction. And that's all this movement input needs. It needs the direction, and then we give the scale value, which is 1. So it will say that whatever value it is, do 1, and if this movement component gets -1, it will do the opposite of that. Similarly, if I paste this like this, I select my capsule component and I get forward a vector, select this, select the world direction, and I select my y-axis. Okay, so you could see how this looks. For X, we are just taking the right and saying, hey, whenever I press X value, or whenever X is given 1 and 0, just do it left and right. And then I'm taking forward vector and saying, hey, I want to move it forward and back. Let's try this. S is moving back, W is moving front, A is moving left, R is moving right side. If I press both, it's now moving in all direction. Now one thing to keep in mind, okay, our right vector and forward vector are based on our characters. So if I choose my spring arm and move my camera something like this, okay, and if I press W, you could see I'm not moving front to me. I'm not moving it based on my camera, but I'm actually moving based on my character or capsule component. So why is that? It's simply because we are saying that, hey, the right vector is based on my capsule component rather than my camera direction. And we will do that later, but usually when you have a static camera or 2D stuff, this is like more than enough to do this. Basically, for example, like for HoloNet, it should be more than enough where you don't even need to use like forward vector for that. You just need to do left and right and all that stuff. I'll show how to change that later, but for now, let's proceed to the next stuff. Let's go to input. Let's go to our input mapping context, add new one. And I don't know why every time I do plus it opens. It's kind of annoying. And here I'll choose the new input one, which is IA free look. This one is basically for our movement, right? And again, this is also given. So if I click on here, it can take me like this, and it will say it is also 2D because I want to have like all the directions that we can get. And for this, it is like a lot easier because it comes up with its own stuff, which is mouse XY 2D axis, and that's all we need to use for the mouse. This one automatically has all the functionality built for us. So let's get a free look in here like this. Let's do split like this. And when we are using character movement, we also get something called controller, and it basically automatically like checks the spring arm and does all that stuff for us. So we don't even need to like set up all that stuff. It's done for us. It will basically check, hey, is there a spring arm and camera? Yes, there is. Then let's do that and let's control that. So what I simply need to do is, by default, if I let's say to print string, and let's connect this one. If I move my mouse towards right, you could see it is giving like a value, and if I move towards left, it's giving left negative value. If I stop and move slightly right, you can see it keeps increasing like this. Similarly, if I connect the y-axis in here, left and right is not going to give anything, but up and down, it's going to give something. Even though you're seeing some values, it's slightly, because mouse, it's hard to move like a mouse completely horizontal. So again, one more thing, this input action actually has like triggered, started, ongoing, cancel, completed, right? Started basically only does it once, but triggered, let's say if you press D, it's constantly going to keep running this code until you have pressed D. Okay, and if you just do started like this, it will only work once. So you have to like tap 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 tap. So it's good for like single bullet fire. But if you are using automatic, it should be on triggered, right? Because you do not want to like to tap tap tap. And also what this is based upon, so what this does is also based upon what your input action you have set to. So for example, if in the input action, if you add the triggers and you set this to hold and release, pressed, combo, and all that stuff, then it basically changes what this does. Okay, so the order changes. And there is actually a video called like all 9 input actions of Unreal Engine, which shows how it works, and it's like really good. It's very small video, but it gives you idea. But if you're new, triggered and started is like all the stuff that you need to know for now. Now we just type add controller. Now you could see there are pitch, roll, and yaw. This is nothing but X, Y, and Z. I don't know which is X, which is Y, and which is Z. I don't really understand pitch, roll, and Y. I do not know why they do not have like Z in the bracket, or if there must be some reason. But I just like to add one thing and then just test it out. Okay. So right now I added roll input, and I'm going to move my mouse left and right, up and down. Nothing's happening. And why is that not happening? Why is there nothing's happening? If I go to my, I think this one, and let's search for controller, you could see I need to now enable that, hey, I want this one to use controller yaw, rotation yaw, which is what I'm using, right? Sorry, roll. Let's try this. Wow, it is so perfect. let's do like different one. Let's do add controller pitch. Let's try it with X. Nothing's happening, simply because we probably didn't do it for this one, pitch like this. So let me just add all that stuff so I know which one it is. So controller yaw, let's try that. Let's see. Okay, you could see this is moving up and down, but I'm actually moving my mouse left and right. So I can simply just connect this as Y, and then now it should work. Let's do up and down. It is reversed. You could see it is actually reversed based on my axis. If I'm moving my mouse up, it is actually looking down, and it is inverted. I don't want that. So I'm going to go into my IMC movement. In this modifiers, I'm going to add the negative modifier, but I'm not going to do for everything, right? We don't want to do it for every single thing. I only want to do it for the Y. So just make sure you select only Y, else you will also be reversing or inverting the x-axis. So now let's try up and down. So if I do up, it is looking up. If I do down, it is looking down. Let's try adding the yaw. You could see left and right is working perfectly. Up and down is working perfectly, and it works, but my character is moving based on my, where I'm looking, like this. I don't want that to happen. So we need to actually select our spring arm, and here we need to select use pawn controller rotations. If I click this, and after this go into your PP blueprint and make sure, like this one, to disable everything. So right now we enabled everything, right? It's better to disable and then have a spring arm control that. So use pawn control rotations. So this one will actually start using whatever it is from the spring. Now if I click on here, I can now move my mouse freely like this, but you could see that no matter if I'm pressing W, it's actually moving at the front of that character rather than moving where my mouse is looking. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so this add controller yaw input and pitch input, we are saying that, hey, start using this one, and make sure to disable the controller around here so that we can say that, hey, we are not using This one we are actually using from the spring arm. Now I want it to move towards the direction where we are looking. So let's do one thing. Let's do in here, select in a character movement and select orient rotation to movement. So it will face to the direction where it is moving. So let's say if I'm moving towards right, it will try to move right. But again, now this actually creates like this weird issue, right? So wherever it is facing, it is moving. But remember what we did before, that our controller, or when we press D, it is actually now based on where our right direction of our character is rather than where our mouse is. So when I press D, it is always trying to move towards the right of our character, and when I press A, it's always trying to move towards the left of my character. W is right there and S is right there, and you could see it is trying to face the direction it is moving. But because we have set this as get the right vector of our character or capsule component and forward of this one, it's always going to not work. So right now what we need to do is we need to get the right vector of our where our controller is. Basically this is controller, you could think of it, our mouse moving like this. So we need to get which is where we are looking and what is the right of where we are looking. So let's remove all this stuff and let's start doing stuff like this. So let's do get right vector like this. Now when we do get right vector without selecting anything, this is how it's going to look. I'm going to do split and we get like XYZ. So, okay, so here you could see that roll is X, pitch is Y, and yaw is Z. And for this to work, we need to actually give like two values. Now I don't know how this works and how like it calculates all this stuff, but and it is pretty easy to do. So we simply search get control rotation. Remember, not controller but control, like this. We need to now split like this. The control rotation is obviously going to get from like self, so whatever controller it is using. For the right vector, we need to actually provide X and Z like this and give it around here. Now I do not really know how this works and how this code or logic behind this is. It's probably some mathematical calculations, a way to like find what is right basically. And then I'll copy this one, paste my controller rotation, and now I'm going to search get forward vector like this. Remember, I'm not clicking anywhere, I'm just doing it like outside this stuff so that I get it like this one. I'm going to do split, and this one I'm just going to connect the Z around here. And let's do this one. So the front is just going to be Z, and for the right one it's going to be like this too. Now let's try this. WASD, it's moving like this, and you could see I'm pressing W and I'm just going to move my camera like this. You could see it now looks to the direction we are looking at. If I press A, it's still moving towards left. If I'm pressing D, it's moving towards right. And again, this is literally how every other games are made. Any 3D game is made. If you're playing like say Dark Souls and all, this is literally the controls that are used like this. So remember, I created IA tutorial jump, which is just a digital bull. So if I go into my context, I can say, why does it open everything? I underscore tutorial jump like this. And in IA tutorial jump, I'll say space, and that's all I have to do. And instead of this, I can go IA tutorial jump triggered. I can do jump, which is available in this character movement, and then all the settings are around here, like how much jump it should do and all that stuff. It will basically do jump, and if I now do space, you could see I'm jumping. If I hold, it's basically going to keep jumping, kind of like Minecraft. Again, if I just add it as a started like this, if I hold, it's not going to work. But if I say I'm holding, but it only jumped once. So triggered basically keeps doing all that stuff. If you want, you could even make this have like a branch. So basically it will give like positive and all. So if it is true, basically if the button is been pressed once, basically it's saying that if the button is pressed, then jump. And we can even do like stop jumping. I think it's good to have jump and stop jumping like this, but I do not know why it's good to have. But I've seen like in the template or the starter template, they have done it this way. So just to be safe, we can do this stuff. Now let's try to do one thing. Okay, so I'm just going to disconnect this one from the player controller, and now you could see I'm not able to move at all. So let's go into our this one, which is, so let's create a new blueprint class. Let's do a player controller and call it as bp underscore tutorial player controller, like this. Go into world settings, go into player controller, let's go to bp player controller, like bp tutorial player controller. If I click, obviously nothing's going to happen. So let's click in here, let's open. So when it comes to player controller, we do not need to type enable input. Okay, we don't really need to do that. We can simply do like, let's see what can we do. So let's get the local subsystem in the player controller, local player, like this. Let's do add mapping context. Let's do add mapping context, like this. Let's select our tutorial movement. Let's select this one. If I click, it's still, you can see it is still showing that it's working. Let's see if it's going to work. Nope, it's not working. If I search for self, can we add self in here? Let's see. Yep, you could see now it is working the same way that we did. I don't know if this helped, just like it, and again subscribe if you want me to make videos like this. I'm basically creating these videos for myself. So yeah, that's all. Goodbye.